Okay, I have 9 o'clock. We'll call the July 23rd, 2019 Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start with the agenda review. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there is one addition today. We'd like to present a resolution to the board declaring a state of emergency due to the recent storms.
Okay, why don't we do that right away?
That'd be great.
I'll move the agenda then.
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Okay, we will start with that resolution then.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, Mike.
Morning.
Mike. Sorry to kind of come out of the blue with this, but we've had a couple large rains through the 16th through the 20th, very sporadic through Blue Earth County, heavier in some spots and not as heavy in other. The rains.
I had 7.5 inches last week.
Oh my.
And I only had 3, so it's all over the board. Some of the damage we're looking at is the roadway that made the paper on the 17th.
Yeah.
You may have saw it in the Mankato Free Press, and some accumulated events since the county's had some cleanup and some washouts to fill. So we're just moving. We think we'll meet the threshold for the state portion of it, which is in excess of $130,000 in public uninsured. And with that roadway washed out, their initial estimates are between $200,000 and $300,000, but they don't know. It's so early in the game. So just part of the process is to qualify for these disaster relief funds. Even at the state level, I have to have an emergency declaration in place. So that's why I'm here.
Okay.
I'll move the resolution. I've seen the road, or
Is there a second?
lack of road.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have your resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you again.
Okay, we will move on to the Economic Development Authority meeting. Come on up.
Morning. How you doing?
I think we'll start with the recess. Do I have a motion to recess the?
So, second?
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, then we'll call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order. Start with agenda review.
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda today.
Okay. Motion to approve.
Approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. The minutes of the 21st, 2019 meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to look those over?
Move approval of the minutes?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, we'll move on to the resolution.
All right. Chairperson Purvis and members of the EDA, as authorized at the May 7th board meeting, an RFP for consulting services for public housing repositioning was issued. And as you may recall, this is to take a look at some options that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has recently opened up for housing authorities and EDAs. And it basically makes possible a shift in the funding source for our public housing units. So as you know, Blue Earth County owns and operates 75 public housing units, as well as 9 units at Breckenridge that are not public housing but were funded with tax credits. Currently, the operations of those public housing units are funded with rent proceeds, which are 30% of our tenants' income that goes toward their rent. And then we receive an operating subsidy from HUD, as well as capital funds to be able to do modernization and improvements in our units. So those 3 funding sources make up the operating stream for those housing units. And the shift in funding would take a look at still having the rent income, which is still 30% of a tenant's income. So that doesn't shift at all for a tenant. But the other source of income for the EDA would then be a housing assistance payment, or HAP, through HUD. And so that operates more like the voucher program that we also operate. We would be the landlord and still own and operate, but we would enter into a HAP contract with HUD for that assistance. So it's more of a shift in funding. At this time, we're not suggesting any other substantial changes to, the number of units or the way the units are made up. We did receive, that RFP was issued in May and due back May 31st. We did receive 4 proposals. And after reviewing the proposals, there was a range of cost from one proposal had just an hourly rate. They estimated they thought the cost would be about $25,000, but it was not to exceed. It was just an estimate, up to $203,000. After staff review, based on experience and cost, we are recommending utilizing Recap Real Estate Advisors. If we were to move forward with them, the initial contract would be just a portfolio assessment and then resident consultation, and that would not exceed $12,200. And at that point, the board would have a decision to make on whether you wanted to proceed. And if you did want to proceed with an application to reposition our public housing, then there would be additional fees up to $21,500. And that's anticipating one application to HUD. So the total cost of the contract, if we were to proceed through to that point, would be $33,700. And again, the recommendation is based partially on cost. In the range of fees, it was reasonable, but also the experience of that consulting firm assisting housing authorities with determining which of the options was the best options long-term, and then going through the implementation phase as well.
Okay.
So the funds to pay for the consulting fee, we would suggest utilizing our capital funds, because HUD has indicated that is an eligible use of capital funds. And we feel that it fits best because it is looking at the public housing units long-term, and we have adequate funds in the capital fund program. So at this time, I can take any questions.
Very good. Have any questions?
I have a question. In there, is the city of Mankato and the county combined, or is it separate?
It is a separate contract.
That's how I thought I read it.
Yes.
I just was curious.
It is. So
Since
each,
you do ours, I was just kind of curious.
yeah, so each entity would be entering into a contract, into a separate contract. Because we do have different portfolios and different accounting for each of the 2 separate programs, they have to do the portfolio assessment separately. So it's possible that they may ultimately end up making different recommendations for each of the housing authorities. Staff has a preference for utilizing one consultant, even though they're separate contracts, just for from the communication aspect and making sure that we're all on the same page. Utilizing one consultant seems advantageous. So Mankato, the Mankato EDA did authorize staff to move forward with a contract with Recap, and the Blue Earth County contract is a distinctly separate contract. The fee pricing is exactly the same, because even though we have Mankato has more units than Blue Earth County does, in the range of public housing and what it takes to do the assessment, our numbers aren't that different. We're not a neither housing authority has 7,000 housing units. We're both we're both considered a small PHA, or a small housing authority by HUD. And so the contract price is the same.
Any
I
other
would
questions?
move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Is there any more discussion?
Just a comment. I think this is a way to move forward. When I was at USDA, rental assistance was always kind of tenuous, whether it was going to be there or not. And I don't think this is a guarantee, but it's a much better opportunity for us to have some sustainability in our housing portfolio than currently exists. So.
I agree.
Okay. That's a good point.
Good idea.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Okay, we'll call the board meeting back to order. Continue on with our agenda.
Well, Mr. Chair, we weren't sure if Mr. Franks would arrive in time,
He's here.
but appears that he is here, so I
Perfect
guess we
timing.
can.
I saw him
Turned in.
sitting down the hall here earlier on, so I was.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
So, not to let Carver County down, but I was here on time. I just want to be clear about that, so thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Rod Franks, and I'm the Health and Human Services Director at Carver County. I also have the distinct privilege to serve this year as the President of the Minnesota Association of County Community Social Services Administrators. Us human services people, we love our acronyms. That's a beauty. It's MAXA, so that's what we call it, and I'll call it that from now on. Each year, MAXA honors a member by awarding our highest honor, the Human Services Award. To be nominated for this award, a member must be in solid membership for at least 5 years, have participated in various committees or held office, demonstrated outstanding leadership, shown a high level of commitment to serving people in need, and exemplified professional standards. In fact, past participants of this award include a connection to Blue Earth County, when in 2008, Mr. Meyer was a recipient of this award. This year, however, MAXA did something a little unusual. Now, knowing Phil, I'm thinking you may be used to sometimes things being a little unusual.
Oh, yeah.
But what was different this year was that the Human Services Award was given to an exceptional two-person team, Phil Clausen and Angela Youngberg. Some comments from their nomination I'd like to share with you. Both of these professionals, because they are a team, work hard together for the betterment of the citizens of Blue Earth County, as well as other citizens throughout Minnesota. The nomination goes on to say that these two have a shared vision and passion for helping others in human services fields that just oozes out of their pores. Both candidates have testified as experts on state legislature. They have a strong desire and commitment to improving the lives of clients they serve. They have a professional commitment to share what they have experienced and learned with peers and assisting other counties, and the Beyond the Yellow Line project comes to my mind. As a team, they add their strengths to serving the clients with empathy, passion, and commitment, and a strong desire to help others. They are true leaders of MAXA, and certainly I'm glad to know them as colleagues and also as friends. I really could not agree more with any of those sentiments shared in their nomination. Phil and Angie, there are no two more deserving people for this award. Thank you for all you do for the residents of Blue Earth County, the members of MAXA, and for the people of Minnesota. It is my pleasure to present to the Blue Earth County Board of Commissioners the 2019 Human Services Award recipients, Phil Clausen and Angela Youngberg. I'm going to hand them out their awards, and I'm thinking if you have a few comments. Phil, thank you so much. Thank you, Rod. It's my honor. Andrew, thank you so much.
I'll be brief.
Oh, you mean I won't?
So, yeah, it was unusual when Rod was announcing the winners of this year's Human Services Award, and for two people to get the award is very highly unusual. And Phil and I work closely together, obviously, and one of the things that helps us get through each day is we often remind each other about different mantras or different things that we believe in. And a couple of years ago, Phil said to me, when when it wasn't one of those perfect days, you know, it was a struggle. And he reminded me, he said, Angie, we get to do this. You know, we get to. And that has stuck with me every day, that I am fortunate enough to come here, serve Lorth County residents every day. I am able to wake up in the morning, come to a job that I love, and do things for people that don't otherwise have the same opportunities. And to be creative and think outside of the box and not just do the regulatory level work. While we do that, and we try to do that as best as possible, we try to be innovative. And I don't think that that's common all across the board. You know, I think that because of what you afford to Phil and I, we get to be creative. We get to do these jobs. And so I just want to say thank you that I recognize that I work in an environment that supports that. And so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just first thank Rod for making this effort. It does mean a lot. You know, sometimes things happen and you get certain recognition, or you get to be up in front of the county board, and it becomes part of your job. But this is a real special moment, so thank you. And it does represent all of your guys' support. You've supported our mission every year as long as I've been here, 20 plus years. And then the rest of the folks up at the table are partners as well. And Angie obviously is my day-to-day partner, that we really do stay in that trench together, work together. I certainly want to mention our team, our 11 supervisors. They're the ones that do the heavy lifting, and you guys know that and recognize them. And so I recognize them as standing up here with us, because it's a team deal. So I think, you know, we were both a little shocked to receive this. We were pleased that we had this in partnership, this award. And I said there's two things that really matter, is relationships and relationships. So I appreciate the relationship I have with all of you, with Rod, certainly with Angie, and then all the people that pull on this rope with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to take a couple of seconds to say thank you, Phil and Angie, for your work. You've done incredible work, and I too can't think of two people that deserve this award more than you two. So we're very proud of you, and we thank you for your service.
Yep.
Do we have time for a photo op?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They haven't given it to two people from the same county. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, very special. Very special. Yeah.
You should be able
Thank you so much.
Jumped ahead. Thank you so much.
I have Commissioner Murphy.
It'll be okay.
Where do you want to do this? Where do you want
Right here, I think. I'm just gonna close the shade a little bit.
You want this down
Oh,
too?
that, thank you. Don't need to put you to work.
Why not? Okay.
Yeah, right here is great in front of you.
Okay.
Recipients in the middle?
Yep.
I'm assuming.
Okay. All right.
Okay. There we go. There.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
You'll get one with you in it too?
Oh, right, I think you were in it. I didn't realize that. Yeah. Perfect right there.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Well, congratulations.
How are you gonna follow that?
Yeah, I know. It's like everything's downhill from here.
Before it goes down. Does that mean your next report's gonna be really short?
All right. Thank you, Rod. Yeah. Thanks for driving safe. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Rod. An hour, right?
you.
I'm sorry?
It took you an hour?
An hour and 7 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so real easy.
It's a slick little, my sister lived in Waconia. It was an hour from my front door to her front door.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, easy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Come on up, Phil.
I'm going to invite Angie up with me just because we're going to talk
Perfect.
about Yellow Line today.
I think that's a great idea.
All right.
Oh, that's a fun thing to talk about.
Absolutely.
The real expert here then.
That's right. Yeah. Like I say, the
I
real.
talked about
the
it
real
at
work.
the NACO board meeting.
Oh, nice. Good. We'll take all that. Free press. We like it. Oh, we have a couple of signature pages.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I do have just a couple of action items. The first one should be familiar to the board in that it's about the tobacco-free grounds policy. We had a work session on July 9th where we talked about our desire to move forward towards the steps that will be necessary to adopt tobacco-free grounds for Blue Earth County. We did define a time frame over the next 6 months, more realistically within the next year, so between 6 months and 1 year. And this is really just an action item. I have a signature page for the board chair to sign to indicate that we're formally going to start that research and development. So that's that item. And then my second action item, there's a attachment with it, a letter from the provider. The name of the organization is Cato Project 3. And it really is a piece of the application process for Mindy. Mindy used to work for us a few years back, who's starting an outpatient chemical dependency treatment program for adolescents. And in the letter, some of the specifics are outlined. The location of her business will be Frost Plaza on Riverfront Drive, serving 12 to 18-year-old adolescents. Intensive outpatient chemical dependency program, and she will accept referrals both from our county and other counties up to 16 clients. She's also willing to do step-down programs for people that are going to inpatient, have to come back to the community. Sometimes it's too big of a jump right back into home, and so helping with that as well. So just put at the end of that paragraph, and again have a signature page for our board chair, indicating that staff would recommend that we do express a need for this service in our community.
Okay. Any questions for?
Just a small question. Is that next to the Wooden Spoon? I think it is. Never mind.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty
either.
sure it is. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Okay.
And second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
After seeing the last information that we received for the amount of employees from Blue Earth County that actually smoked or used tobacco, I certainly am in positive, response to this. I thought we had more.
Yeah.
I was surprised of the low amounts. I'm proud of our employees that we don't have as many. And I think we really have to work on the health and welfare for everybody across the board. So for us to look into this more and get some action steps and get going for the tobacco-free grounds is a very positive step.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a comment on that, Mr. Chair, that I know the board is aware that public health really has a strategy, a population-based strategy, and by you supporting an action like this, it sends a message about health, a positive message, I think. So appreciate that. I think the hard one in what Bob did in the survey was the tobacco, and we talked about that at the work session. It's hard to measure, hard to know sometimes if somebody's consuming, chewing tobacco. So that one I think might be underrepresented a little, but I think again, it'll be a positive message and give people an impetus to say, you're really not allowed to be chewing tobacco on the grounds. And so I really support that according to our public health mission, your work.
Well, it might give that person one extra reason to quit.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, I can't do it here, and it's just not worth it anymore. And I think that's the reason. I mean, you're finding more and more people are going tobacco free across the board.
Absolutely.
I mean, compared to 20 years, 30 years ago, you just nowadays when you see somebody with a cigarette in their mouth, you know, people almost look down upon them. 20 years ago, that was just what it was.
Isn't that right?
Yep.
I always tell this story of looking at TV from years ago, and there'd be the state legislature, and they'd be like, "So tell me, Mr. Smith." It's just so weird.
Any public,
Yes,
any public
exactly.
place.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Vance and I were just in Clark County, and where they don't, everybody smokes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, in the casino.
That's because of the gambling there?
Yeah.
Well, and they don't have the same rules that we
Well,
have in the state of
obviously,
Minnesota for public. Of course, our casinos across the state of Minnesota are the same way, but because they're run by the reservations. But it's so nice to be in a building that you don't have to.
Right.
You know, and when your hotel rooms are really tobacco free, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
Just one more thing. I'm excited about this youth, for lack of a better term, chemical dependency program. I think it's so critical, and if we can stop something then, as opposed to later on, I think it's a really positive thing. So I'm glad this is going to happen.
Thank you. Agree.
Very good. Okay, if there's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Action items are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one big area of review here today and discussion about Yellow Line and updating some of the statistics that we do have and telling our story on what's been happening, especially in the last year or so. I will say Pat and others on our team have been involved in this, so would certainly ask him to join in if there's things he would want to add. And then Angie, to be really candid, has done the heavy lifting in all of this, and I'll explain what we've been up to of late. The first slide that says project status on it, just to, again, in a nutshell, the elevator speech is we obviously focus on mental health and chemical health, trying to get upstream, like Commissioner Landcamer just stated, and identifying specific goals that individuals can work on, often in lieu of further incarceration or longer stays in incarceration, get them moving and working on goals that get to those root issues of mental health and chemical health. And our window that we work with them on for Yellow Line is 60 days. Often we will hand off to the current case managers that deal with people on a longer term basis when that's needed, and that is very common. And so we have both sometimes those individuals, especially with a lot of colleges in our town, that it's their first time, that maybe they've been involved with law enforcement, and it creates a certain picture. And then we have folks that have had a long chronic pattern of use, and they're very different how we treat them and how we work with them. The first bullet, just increasing the footprint of YLP services. What this really means, since February with Angie and really a subcommittee of the different people involved in Yellow Line have been working on really countless hours, hundreds of hours, on setting up pathways and defining our workflows for what we call this 1 to 3 day pathway development and implementation. Previously, what we've done up till now, the past 3 years plus, had been all that diversion work. And that is half of what we want to do into the future. The other half is to deal with folks that are mandatory holds that do cross over the Yellow Line, but that might be in jail between 1 to 3 days. So in and out, get them back out and try to look at that population. When the board supported us in having the second FTE, the second staff, what we call the community-based coordinators, come on board, the idea was to expand this footprint in this way and deal with both those complete prevention, not going to jail, as well as crossing over to this real short-term in and out pathway. And so that's what's been worked on. We do believe our numbers that we'll be presenting will probably at least double. We think that there's even more out there, and I think Angie and Pat have both been supportive in being careful not to overpromise or overwhelm our staff at this point, because I think there's a lot of people we could help. So we have to draw the line somewhere. But we're very excited. We've been working on this and visioning this for a long time to increase this. And the 50-50 split is just that both staff will work with both populations, but the equivalent will be one staff dedicated to behind the yellow line for that 1 to 3 day, and the other staff, FTE, to prevention. And so they'll work as a team on those. I did bring along just a list, and this is not to review, but just to hand around. Excuse me getting up here a second.
I can pass them around.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pardon my getting up and doing this. It obviously was an add-on, but I thought here's a list of common goals that people work on, and law enforcement was asking for more specific examples. And so because we worked on that this week, I thought I'd add that and just bring that in, just so that you get some idea of when the individuals do engage what we call a yellow line plan. These are the goals, examples of common goals that are on that plan. Obviously, they're individualized. It's not that we pick off this list. We just asked our staff, what are common things that people identify? And so I just wanted the board to see examples of that in a practical way. I do want to just give a quick update and then hand off to Angie, and we'll go back and forth on some of these other slides. Just a regional update. 4 other counties in our region, in Region 9, as we define it in our human service terms, have actively engaged diversion work like this: LeSueur, Brown, Nicollet, Rice, ourselves. So those 5 counties. Watonwan just reached out and is also expanding and looking at doing this work as well, and trying to invest in staff to do this work. Throughout the state, there's probably about 10 other counties that are active in expansion, and meaning that they have either staff hired or that they've gone beyond the planning stage. And then there's probably 20 others that are also planning and lesser involved. So I just wanted the board to have some idea that I think this type of intervention is growing. The interest is growing. I think the utility is showing itself. And each county does it slightly different. And we think that's great, because every county is different, and their scale and scope and what their issues are different. So I'm going to hand off to Angie here and go over the pathways slide.
Morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I am going to review these pathway slides. Some of you may have seen this already, but it's just a basic overview of the different kinds of ways that we can intervene with a person, and it's a illustrated representation of how this really works. And so we can work with a person at the street level. So and that's that first line. So basically, there's a call for service. An officer goes out to respond to a call for service, whether it's for a welfare check or some type of criminal activity. Does not matter to us what that call for service is about. But if the officer requests, we will either respond to the scene, we'll do it by phone, we'll do it whatever method works best for that officer and that person, but we'll provide a screening regardless if there's charges or not. And we screen for mental health and chemical health needs. And then if the necessary pieces are met, we will offer community-based services to that individual. An example of this just happened within the last few weeks, where there was a single mother of many children, I'll just say many children, living in her car and was there were concerned members of the community that had made calls into law enforcement. So they did a welfare check on this family. And although there were no criminal charges or nothing criminal pending for this mother, the officer thought of the Yellow Line Project. And so he called specifically and said, I need a screening for this mother. Come to find out there are chemical health needs, mental health needs, and lots of family needs involved. And so we've spent hours and hours working with this individual. No criminal charges, no child protection intervention. We're able to address the homelessness issue and the housing issues, both short-term and working on a long-term plan. And so I think just to me, it's a really good story that illustrates how prevention can work in this kind of situation where Human Services is really set up to be more reactive in those kinds of situations. So this is a very current picture about how we can intervene. And really it's because the officer thinks of it. That's why the officer wanted something different for this family. And changing that culture has been an important part of our collaboration with law enforcement. Pre-booking diversion, a person is brought into pre-booking, the pre-booking area of the jail. That's where a lot of the screenings take place. It's after some type of criminal activity takes place, and so the screening occurs there. Oftentimes this is individuals that we work with in this situation are related to a DWI or driving after revocation, and so we're working on treatment services for that individual. And then the 1 to 3 days incarcerated is what Phil had talked about, where we're heading down the path. Right now we're doing voluntary work with that, but with Pat's assistance we'll be working to expand that significantly here in the coming weeks. And so another example, there was an officer that called our Yellow Line staff and said, please have someone waiting at the door. I want a screening on this individual. He's got to be held in jail because of the level of the charge. But there was very clearly some mental health needs happening. And he had some physical health, serious physical health needs that needed to be addressed, homelessness issues. And so we worked very quickly to establish services for this individual. So again, preventing what would typically have come out would have been a civil commitment situation or something much more high end. And so the charges still progressed with this individual, but the other high end pieces did not need to result. And then the final pathway that is not on this page is exceptions. So we do offer assistance within the jail when there is a person in the jail that is civilly committed, when competency is in question, or if prior to coming into jail they're a member of a group home, they are a resident of a group home. And so we work directly with those individuals to help get them back out into the community appropriately.
Pat, do you have anything to add at this point? Keep rolling.
Okay, you're doing great.
I do appreciate Pat's willingness to help us lead through that last pathway, and already he's met with the judges and made sure they're fully informed of what our intentions are, and we're trying to make sure we do dot our I's and cross our T's before we move forward. I'm going to skip one slide and have Angie come back to that one, but this one that says 18 months on top, and it has the 2,217 individuals. Just to look at this, it's probably the best way to kind of break down what the last 18 months have looked like. 2,200 people plus have been screened, and that also includes information and referrals. So we don't just screen for mental health and chemical health and then that's it. We also offer them services to re-engage AA, to go see their therapist. If medication management is an issue, we do actively engage them. So that big number means that we've touched a lot of people, and we always try to do a real practical warm handoff if there is one. 266 people then were referred and eligible once we looked at what their situation was, legally with regard to the jail, and what their presenting issues were with regard to chemical health or mental health. 115 of those 266 engaged the Yellow Line plan fully, and Angie will, that slide, if we can back up to the previous one, you'll see some of the results of that on a percentage basis.
So of that much larger number, the 2,200, 81% of those individuals screened as having either a mental health or chemical health need, which is substantially higher than some of the written stats that are out there about individuals in jail for what their mental health and chemical health prevalence is. And so this is by self-report or observation. And so we're not getting medical records and digging in, we're just talking to people and observing their behaviors. And so it's quite significant. Phil shared that 115 individuals engaged in the Yellow Line Plan. 82% successfully completed all goals of their Yellow Line Plan. That is a significant number of saying positive voluntary approaches result in that kind of success rate. And then on average, we look at individuals 3 months post-closing, 6 months, 12 months, and on average about 6% of the successful participants have future law enforcement contacts. And so since we only have 18 months of data, we're still building that up. And this is not a recidivism rate, I'll say that, because we have some limitations with our data. We can only see what we can see within Minnesota. But 6% have future law enforcement contacts. That's a very low number when we look at projects of this type.
And just to project back, so the 115, the people that fully engaged, and the 82% that completed, as we start to guess about the future, so as we do this 1 to 3 day pathway, that 115 is the number that we think could easily double. And so we're more like, maybe a couple hundred people a year or something like that. This is 18 months. But we'd also guess, as we start to speculate, that some of the successfully completed would go down just because these folks are going to have charges over their head and some different motivations. And so you can start to guess. The hardest thing, it's a fun thing to be in turf that's ill-defined at times because you can be creative, but the hard thing is there's no roadmap. And so we're guessing along the way at what's really going to happen. And that does work on you over time because you're really, it's a nebulous feeling of how to get your footing. And so we're guessing at some of these pieces, but like I say, we're excited. We've been preparing a long time to try to expand our reach. So just a couple other quick data sets here.
These next slides we'll go through rather quickly, but the next slide is about detox costs. And I know that as board members, these next slides are items that you do watch year over year. And since we implemented the Yellow Line project, it's the first time that the detox costs have gone down when I can look back in the historical records. And so we did not target detox costs in the beginning. It was just a natural influence. Now we are actively working with Brown County Evaluation Center and offering individual services that go into Brown County Evaluation Center. And so what's striking to me about this is it's a downward trend and it's leveling out. And so those are two really good outcomes. So a 22% decrease from the 2015 year, which is really high. The next page is state hospital costs. So this is Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center and the community behavioral health hospitals across the state. And so with legislative changes, we really projected our budget to be in the $350,000 to $370,000 based on prior utilization and the cost shifts that came into place. But because we're getting so far ahead of individuals' needs going into jail, we've been able to bring that number substantially down and level out year over year. And so this is projected for 2019 based on utilization. And I would say that it may be lower, but this 60,000 is where we felt comfortable at this point. So it's a decrease from the ongoing budget target.
And if I could just add, my storytelling about that is the tenacity of the staff. Is when you see somebody with high needs in a place where we know it's not going to go well for them in incarceration, the activity, the intensity of trying to really advocate for a better plan through the crisis center or through some kind of creative solution where they can be either in a safe environment, or what we've added is a safety plan to make sure that we're very, very clear about how we're going to ensure safety. But as they are incarcerated, a lot of times these are the very individuals that do worse and worse and are very disruptive to the jail itself. either self-harm or harm to others is a high risk. And so that number is because people work in the trenches really hard, and I have the luxury of seeing that. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm connecting the dots with the board, because I think you guys can surmise this by this kind of a reduction. But the amount of work that goes into just bird dogging a situation and saying, we got to find a bed for this person. And again, Pat's willingness to work with us in those cases, the jail's willingness to work with us in those cases, and law enforcement trying to come up with a solution that makes more sense is been our whole goal. So it's a really striking number.
Be interesting to see the cost value of that, because all of us know what it costs the county to put somebody in the state hospital.
Right.
It's extremely expensive. And you're seeing such a cost value. It's just amazing, and I'm very impressed with that. Very impressed with that.
It's also quality of life.
Yeah.
Oh my, yes.
You know, that's bigger than anything, yeah.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, Mike Maurer and I have gone out to lunch times. He's like, you know, Phil, we got people doing self-harm in the jail cell, and you just can't be okay with that. I mean, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. So quality of life and just a humane action about our system making some better sense. So that's excellent.
Yep.
And then the final data slide that we have is about the mobile crisis integration. So what makes this project possible on a 24-hour basis is our partnership with Horizon Home's crisis team, so their mobile crisis team. And so not only our partnerships with law enforcement, the county attorney's office, and others, the public-private partnership with Horizon Homes has been instrumental. And when they approached us, in February of 2017, saying, we think that we can be a part of this. And they were saying our numbers are lower from a regional perspective. We were saying that it feels like the community isn't utilizing the service nearly as much of mobile crisis, nor is law enforcement. And so we did some data mining, and the yellow line on this chart represents law enforcement contacts to the mobile team. And so there was a direct correlation of bringing law enforcement and the mobile team to the table with the Yellow Line project to the access and services by law enforcement to the mobile team. And so there's been over a 400% increase in mobile service calls from individuals and from law enforcement combined since they joined the Yellow Line project. And Commander Matt DeRose was recently at the Horizon Homes Crisis Center open house and made a public statement about the critical partnership and how they view the mobile team as, really integrated with their team, and how it makes their work so much easier in dealing with individuals with high mental health needs. And the Department of Human Services was at that open house, and since then they have approached us to say, we need to learn from your model, because this is something that teams are struggling with all over the state. How are you guys integrating in such a way that law enforcement and mobile teams are working so closely together? And so that's something that we're starting conversations with the department on for further expansion of those philosophies and principles.
And Angie, I just want to check one other thing out with you, is that I believe also, even though the call might be initiated not by law enforcement has been increasingly responsive to partnering with the mobile team. So they will call law enforcement as backup, and just having law enforcement professionals on our board, that bridge is so good right now that there's this good faith. And so I think even though the call might not have been a law enforcement calling them, they're responding alongside them just for safety and for support. And that of course is, as you suggest, the quality of the services being provided have really improved as well.
Yes.
That's really what we had, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Can I ask a quick question? Sure. 266 individuals were referred and eligible. 115 took advantage of it. What were the reasons that others didn't? And I know they're broad, and
They are.
Some people just didn't want to, or?
Correct. Some people didn't want to, or they're not trusting of services,
Yep.
or they're saying, I'm really scared. This is my first time to have contact with law enforcement. I'm not talking to anyone. In those situations, individuals after they're booked into jail, and if they do talk to someone back into the housing units, and they say, and their neighbor says, hey, did you get your yellow line screening, or did you do your plan? And they're like, no, I didn't want to talk to anyone. We will go back and do the screening. We will go back and offer information and referral services. So we're not saying, oh, too late, you're not going to be offered anything. And so we do circle back at that point. And I think sometimes the person's just not in a state of acceptance.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, this works because of the voluntary nature of it, and not everyone is voluntary. I mean, they may be a perfect candidate, but if they don't want help, it's really hard to force help on someone. And so we're excited about the 1 to 3 day opportunities, because what that will give us is another chance at another conversation with them, and a little bit more time to go by where they may think differently. And so working with Kat's office, we're excited for that kind of an opportunity.
So we've defined our scope really tightly to begin with because we wanted to control that.
Sure.
And yet that's hard to watch because there is clearly this other population that's even bigger than the one we've been serving that we think we could influence about getting back out in the community. Our focus has always been community looking. So anytime there's somebody that really needs to be incarcerated, that's not the population we're gonna look at even into the future. But if there's some of those that cross over, that's the hardest part of your question, is that we see people crossing over the line and we feel like we kind of lose them because they're going down that road. And so this 1 to 3 day, why we're so excited about it, is we think we can, kind of grab them and, kind of help them back into the community. And then that's when legislatively our funding source would kick in, is anytime we're out in the community, we can't get paid for any jail services for our social workers. And so the way they look at that is either community-based or jail. Jail isn't covered. And so we're saying these 1 to 3 day folks, we can also push them back out in the community, track them for 60 days, and get paid for that. So I think that's a really big piece of that particular question. And I think people's attitudes do change as word gets out that we're for real and that we really can help them, and they talk, of course, amongst themselves. And so that's also a dynamic that's going on right now.
One of the things I learned at NACO is some counties are looking at getting rid of fines, because it's kind of that circular down. They don't have any money to begin with. They've been in trouble, and now they've got these fines, and it sometimes turns them the wrong way. And so they're talking about, in some places, getting rid of fines because it doesn't seem to be doing what it needs to be doing. There are other ways to deal with that, community services, that type of thing, but the fines can really create more problems than you had when you started.
Absolutely. I talked about throwing darts in the dark, and our scope has always been 10 to 20% of the population. So really of those screenings where we hit, upwards of 95, 96% of everybody will participate. Some just say, I don't want to talk to you. But it's a very low number, actually. And so that 2,200 is pretty much everybody that is involved, and just a few that just reject it altogether. And we've always wanted 10 to 20% to be our target populations. We feel like we're not that far away, especially if we can get to this 1 to 3 day and try to look at that population. You can set that line. I mean, we got into a debate about bail because the same issue is somebody who doesn't have money to bail out. If somebody does, they can get out of jail. If somebody doesn't, it's an economic factor that's controlling all of that. And so that's a whole nother piece, a lot like finance.
There was a lot of discussion on bail too.
Absolutely, it's a hot topic.
Because it's a real problem.
Right.
Only poor people can't get out.
Exactly. And it's very clear that that's true.
Yeah.
I just had a quick one on that. Current homelessness, if there's, what kind of percentage or number of people have that problem as well? Kind of, if you have an idea, or and if we're meeting it as far as finding a place for them? Or?
Yeah, I don't have a percentage for you. We will have that. So as Phil talked about, over the last 6 months, we've really done a deep dive into some of our, well, every workflow, I'll say, with the Yellow Line Project. And we are going to be having those stats about what are these services, what are the specific needs, especially with this 2,217 individual number. So what are the things that they're struggling with, and what is the information that we're providing? So we will have that data in a year. But I will say right now, housing and homelessness is one of the top things that we are discussing with the community-based coordinators about. And it's not, I mean, sometimes it's immediate, that homelessness piece, like that story that I shared. But oftentimes it's, I am being evicted, or I am couch hopping and I can't, find a place to be. So it's, I'm good for tonight, but in a week I don't know where I'm going to be. And so there's a little bit difference between housing and homelessness, but it is quite striking, the amount of individuals that have that as a need, and families. So I've been surprised at the number of families. And so on here you'll see number 13, complete the VI SPDAT. Our staff have become very well educated on how to get them into housing resources and how to get that ball rolling. And so it is more than we anticipated, I would say.
I know they do a good job. They try a lot.
I was just going to say, Commissioner 2, number 18, Visit the Reach. I asked Angie, I said, what's that about? But they'll take, some of these college kids that aren't housed or in a very bad situation with a roommate or something and work with us. So that one also rings the same bell. And then the final one, address the current homelessness, establish transitional housing, and get a plan in place. And so this is where our social workers can help them actually do that. You can put on a list, but we'll actually track that for 60 days and make sure, did you follow up, or how did this go? And that difference is the big difference, is as opposed to, they already know what they maybe should do or could do, but to actually do it is a big jump. And so we help them kind of motivate that piece.
Well, and especially with kids, when you think about not having a stable roof over your head, I mean, it impacts everything. The governor spoke at a meeting I was at about a couple months ago about housing, and he said, we can put all sorts of money into education, but if those kids don't have a stable roof over their heads, it doesn't make any difference, because they worry about that all the time. Are they homeless? Are they in a place they shouldn't be? So it's so interconnected, and the importance of stable roof over your head and access to services is really important.
Yep. Good. Any other questions for Phil and Angie? Well, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
And to make it work a little bit further.
Congratulations again.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations. This is a great list.
Yeah, it kind of helps, doesn't it? Put
Yeah.
some reality to it. So,
Yeah.
Let's take a short break.
Thank you.
And then
Okay.
we'll come back and do the rest. Okay, let's continue on with our administrative services. Bob?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the first item is the county board minutes for July 9th.
I'll move approval.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Next would be the bills for the 2 weeks indicated.
I'll move the bills. Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All my answers.
There's no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bills are approved.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 5 in your packet is the Human Resources Department agenda. It's just informational items for the board today. We have filled a couple of positions, a care coordinator in the Human Services Department, as well as a custody officer up in the jail. We also have promoted an assessment specialist to an appraiser position, so we've initiated recruitment to refill that assessment specialist. And then we've had a couple of individuals leave our organization, one a financial worker, and we did receive a resignation of a custody officer. So we've initiated recruitment to fill both that financial assistant specialist and custody officer. And then the last two items are initiating recruitment on a human resource coordinator and an M-Track coordinator. These are both the result of resignations that we had received previously.
Okay, any questions on?
No questions, but we continually receive resignations for jailers. And, I don't know what we need to do about that. I mean, I think we need to have some sort of a work session, something just to work on that and find out, are we not paying them enough? Is there not enough benefits? I don't know. I mean, but that's a common thing. You see them going on into law enforcement. You see them going on to be a police officer or sheriff's deputy. I understand that, but it's one of those things. It costs money to keep on training people, and I think we have to look at those costs and say, what is this costing us, and can we do something else to retain jailers?
Well, Mr. Commissioner and the board, is certainly an issue that we've been aware of for a number of years. I will say we're not alone in the state. Many counties are experiencing similar challenges as we are. You may recall that in our last union negotiations, we did build in a retention pay component to try and address the pay issues. That didn't solve the problem, obviously. We've changed our hiring practices. We've pursued different kind of qualifications of people. That hasn't fully worked. As you indicated, a lot of those folks are pursuing more patrol types of law enforcement jobs, and there are a lot of openings in those areas around the state. So that's been challenging. I know the Sheriff's Department talks about different strategies. We did a career pathways initiative. We're in the process of creating a video to do custody officer recruitment to try and, again, help our situation. So we are not sitting on our hands, so to speak, but it continues to be a challenge.
I know we've done a lot. I don't know if there's more that we can do, if we can bring in some experts to talk about it. I don't know. And maybe Brad has done this in the Sheriff's Department. I'm not saying it's not being done, but it's just that this is, as long as I've been on, it's almost a continuous thing. Every week we're seeing a resignation of somebody.
Yeah. We have made some strides. I can remember there was a time when we couldn't recruit custody officers.
Yeah.
We were having a tough time even recruiting applicants. Well, now at least we're getting the applicants. So as we move forward, maybe we can work on the retention a little more. But thank you for all the efforts.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that's been done. I'm just trying to show my concern.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Bob on that? Okay, if not, we'll move on.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 6 in your packet is a contract for police services for the city of Pemberton, much like we've done recently with the city of Vernon Center and Good Thunder. Pemberton has approached the Sheriff's Department about providing services under contract, and so we're recommending approval of a contract for 3 hours of patrol time per week for the city of Pemberton.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved.
Item number 7 in your packet is a drug task force agreement for the Minnesota River Valley Drug Task Force Joint Powers Agreement. This is really just a kind of an updating of the Joint Powers Agreement. We've had some changeover in terms of people involved in those entities that are a part of the Joint Powers Board, and so just wanted to get everyone to sign the agreement again. There's been no structural changes to the agreement, but just a commitment from all the same parties going forward.
Move approval?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is approved.
Item number 8 in your packet then is an assignment and assumption of an easement. The board will recall a number of years ago, the county sold the Nichols building to Vine Faith and Action, which is a Minnesota nonprofit organization. As Vine has kind of looked at their organizational structure, they've had some concerns about the liability that comes with owning a building that they then lease out portions of. And so they've decided as an organization to set up another limited liability corporation that will oversee their properties. And as a part of their transferring ownership within their organization, we wanted to ensure that some of the conditions that we had placed on our sale of that property to Vine would continue to this new organization. And so some of the right of first refusal on repurchasing that property will be extended to this new entity that they're creating, and so we're recommending board approval of this agreement.
Okay,
Move to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
It's, this is the same type of thing that AMC does. They have a, you know,
Research fund, which is an
research
LLC,
fund
yeah.
That's an LLC for the board. I mean, so you can understand what Vine is doing.
Yeah. So, good. If there's no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is approved.
Item number 9 in your packet are the second quarter donations from April through June of this year. Most again of the donations are to the library system, and with the summer reading program you'll see a number of items there. We also received a small donation in the Sheriff's Department as well as the clubhouse in Human Services. In terms of in-kind donations, I want to just point out on the third page, page 114 of your packet, Property and Environmental Resources did receive a donation of some land from Bradley and Karen Walker. This is land out by the Ponderosa landfill, and so they were kind enough to donate that property to the county. And so that is noted there as well. And then we also had some donations of time given to the library, and so we're asking the board to accept these donations today.
Move acceptance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
We should probably send the judge a thank you note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty amazing.
Yes.
That's nice.
Absolutely. So, anything else? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. Looks like we're at the end of our administrative.
That's all I have for you
Business.
today, Mr. Chair.
Well, let's move on to commissioners' reports on committees. I bet a couple of our commissioners have some pretty lengthy reports today. Would you like to start, Colleen?
Well, sure, and you all got Vance's comprehensive.
Yes.
NACO and, well, everything.
Yeah.
But, so I'm not going to repeat everything that he said with
Sure.
that. I'm going to start with the 9th, I went to the GMG event. On the 10th, Chad Adams is the new executive director of Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. So I had a meeting with him as Rick Goodman, who was the founder and the only person that ran that for years, and now it's Chad Adams, former city manager in Albert Lea. So he started about a month ago. From the 11th to the 16th, Vance and I were at NACO. Just a couple things that aren't on his report. I'm joining the elections committee. There's going to be new elections legislation written and hopefully passed shortly, just because of all the issues with elections and multiple things where people are concerned that their vote doesn't count or that someone else is managing that vote. So I'm joining the elections committee. The NACO board met. We're in good financial standing. Lots of issues. That's where one of the things about fines came up and bail. So interesting stuff. I went to generational ethics, which was fascinating. Went to a bunch of committee meetings, but and workshops with the generational ethics are really interesting because Gen X is 61 to 81, Gen Y is 80 to 96, and Gen Z is 97 to 2010. And just the differences in those generations. Millennials don't accept the chain of command, and they're more likely to be whistleblowers. They like to work in teams. Gen Z, they process faster, they have a short attention span, they're independent, they do things by themselves, and they're not very collaborative.
Oh.
And they like to do face-to-face, and they are much more interested in convenience over a brand of something. So it's just kind of interesting how we work together, how we do behavioral risk management and accounting. How do you work with those different types of people? Baby boomers are much more collaborative and don't leave at 4:30. So it's just kind of interesting. But how do we work together, and how do we open the door, and how do we walk through that door together? So it was fascinating. Those are some of the things that aren't referenced. Highway 14 partnership on the 17th. Vance and I were there. We had a panel of legislators. And from that panel of legislators, I don't know if there's much hope for a gas tax increase. They talked about how we have to be forward-looking. Electronic vehicles. I don't disagree, we have to be forward-looking, but there's a big gap in the middle where most of us are going to be using gas. And so that makes me a little concerned. Looks like if the feds come through on the Highway 14, that MnDOT will definitely put that, it'll go to the top of their list. But it still creates a hole.
Yeah.
And Pat Henches talked about it, and I think he's right, the Black Neck Bridge is going to have to be replaced in the near future, which is, when you go into Duluth and there's all this cement coming from many ways, and that'll take every bit of bridge replacement for a few years. We had intergovernmental relations on the 18th. Kip and I were there. City of Mankato's looking at some holding ponds, which could impact some of our ditches. I've got it for you, Mark.
Mark's ditch.
And it's Mark's ditch. That's what I said. It's
that,
Mark's ditch.
If they take that one over, Mark will be out of the ditch business.
That's right. That's right. And
you got a couple yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple.
And they're looking
Yeah, I got
at
rid of all mine. So
LCMR funds. So we'll see what happens. On the 19th, Keith Elson had a small group meeting, and we talked about his priorities. And he also talked about Pat was there, the state's attorney, and so he has to stand up and support things that he doesn't always agree with, but that's his job. And the priorities of making sure that consumer protections are in place. I had the Diversity Council yesterday, and there's some interesting things going on. The Right on Race went on for 2 years, and so there's going to be a video and a blog that talks about what happened in that time frame. They're going to do a bus tour on race in Minnesota, and that's going to be November 15th and 16th. More information will be coming out next week if anybody's interested in doing that. Yeah. In 2020, this is kind of long term, but it's interesting, they're going to do a tour across the country. Memphis, DC, Chicago, Columbus, and many other places. They look at it being about a 10-day trip. And They're also, on Labor Day in 2020, going to do a culture festival where it'll be a film festival. And so these are things that really nobody else in the country's doing much of right now. And so Diversity Council is looking at starting that here.
Sounds good.
That's the end of my report, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my activity was relatively slow. After our last meeting, we had our MVAC annual meeting, and we gave out our awards for all of the 9 counties, the supporters and the recipients that have progressed inside the MVAC organization. Clean mentioned Intergov already, which was a good conversation.
Yep.
Sounds like a good project with some good water quality issues around it.
Yep.
And then I was up at the MVAC when the governor came up and spoke about the ending veterans homelessness in Blue Earth County. So I had a great turnout. There was a great crowd of people there, and had a lot of good conversation with a lot of different people. Nick Frentz was there, and a couple other senators and representatives. But the governor did a great job handing out his award, and it was a good program. And then just dealing with some drainage, water, road issues as we do in the rural area.
Great.
Thank you, Kip. Vance?
Well,
Thank you for your written report.
I did that because I don't plan to go over
We
the
haven't
whole
had those
thing.
for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and trust me,
Did
it's
my
probably gonna
predecessor used to
be
do
another
that?
year before you get another one. Our last board meeting and work session was on July 9th. On July 10th, I had my Corrections Advisory Board. Representative Jack Constantine showed up, gave us a review of the legislative session and some of his priorities and what's going on. We had a visit from Carly Stark, who is the new AMC MACAC director, and she gave an overview of the legislative issues and that she sees with MACAC. She was a prior defense attorney, so she's really on the ball, and she'll be very good for AMC and MACAC. July 11th, I flew out to Clark County, Nevada, for the NACO conference, and we started right away in the morning on July 12th with the Transportation Policy Committees. I've got that written down for you. We had some very good discussions. We went through, we voted on 14 different resolutions. I have that for you too. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't think you want me to spend an hour at this. Anyway, I went through a deal with the NACO's people on the Explorer demo on our iPad to get a better knowledge of how to get this information off this machine when we're trying to get information through NACO, and they have a wealth of information for us for counties, you know, where we can compare our counties against other counties across the state, our counties across the United States. And if you don't know how, you can't do it. So I spent time with them, about an hour with them, and that was very good information. I went to Behavior Health and Justice. I did the Rural Action Caucus, and we had past President Sally Clark talk to us, and she is now on the USDA. She took over Colleen's spot.
In Colorado.
In Colorado, yes. Not in Minnesota, obviously.
Yeah.
We had an interesting talk on how Test It works, which is that app that you can put on your phone. And it's really getting used across the United States. So if anybody does not have the app on their phone, really it's just a free app. You put it on your phone, and anywhere you're at, you can get on the internet and then find out how much power that is. What it does is it goes back to NACO, and they can give that list to the government as to where we have good reception and where we don't. and it's getting used across, surprisingly, some of the states that are using it are you don't expect it, but and Minnesota's right in the middle, Let's see. I had a talk on understanding the county's role in growing the world of legal cannabis. Very interesting. Had a couple law enforcement from Nevada that were there, and they weren't against it, but they said that there's a lot of things with legal cannabis that people don't understand and how it affects your areas. One of the biggest issues was smell.
Isn't that amazing?
When they start growing this stuff, the smell is horrendous, and people are putting them in, buildings, and the neighborhoods are getting, that cannabis smell is just horrendous. So just the growing, not the smoking, just the growing of it. I can relate to that because a few years ago when I was on a symposium out in Colorado, we were in some of those buildings, and it's, just the smell of the cannabis growing is amazing. We went through the general session. We had our Minnesota caucus. And as a state, we backed North Carolina Commissioner Ray Jeffers. On July 14th, I did an economic impact and the outdoor recreation. So I was expecting to feel more. When I went to this, I thought, well, we have a lot of outdoor recreation in Blue Earth County. What I found out when I got there, it was more for the Grand Canyon and it was Yellowstone and something far more than what absolutely any county in the state of Minnesota is going to get.
Federal land.
But it was interesting to listen to.
Yeah, Mount Cato, could you get anything to help out there?
Yeah. I went to the National Towards Zero Death meeting. That was very interesting. Had a mobile workshop outside of the casino, which was kind of nice to get outside, but 110 temperature. It was pretty hot, to say the least. But rode in an autonomous bus. We had it was interesting. They have Uber working with another private to do autonomous Uber rides across Las Vegas. So, but they have two people in the front seat that are drivers, but they don't drive. But it's more of a security thing, and it's what they're doing is getting the information. But they showed some of the reactions to people saying, like, you're not driving, but the Uber is doing very well, and any accidents they've had was all somebody else's, rear end accidents and stuff like that people have run into them. So it's coming. It's just, just a process. Oh, let me see here. The Central Region Caucus, we had our annual meeting, and Larry Johnson, L.J. Johnson from Atlanta, Georgia, was voted in second vice president. We had our Central Region Caucus, then we had a general session, and we had our closing celebration.
At the caucus, we recognized veterans. Nice. Which it was all about veterans, so.
It was very.
Very nice.
I was appointed as vice chair of the Rural Action Caucus.
Congratulations.
Out of 3,069 counties across the United States. Great. Most of them are rural. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm one of 3 or 4 vice chairs on that. So that was nice to know they recognized me, and then I was also placed as on the airport subcommittee for transportation. I was placed as vice chair on there. Interesting because, well, I'll get to that. Highway 14 partnership. It was good talking about the Owatonna to Dodge Center spot, the 12.5 miles, and how that's going to start in 2020.
Yep.
And then we talked about the currently unscheduled Nicollet to New Ulm, but of course we have the build grant through the federal government. If we get that 25 million, it's going to be huge, and the state had to sign on to that. And so if we get that build grant, we can probably see something happening. Otherwise, just like Colleen said, the legislators, except for Jeff Brand, the idea of getting more funding is interesting, and to say the least. I had a TDS board meeting on the 18th, and I drove to Henderson. Very nice to know that 93 was open. You can see July 22nd, yesterday, I had my Transportation Alliance Board of Directors meeting, and we actually discussed different methods, and we got different ideas on how we're going to bring the factual data to the legislators to convince them that yes, transportation funding is very, very important. And we've got we're bringing up different ideas, so it's not that 20-cent gas tax increase, and maybe bring in small bits instead of that large one. But of course, that's all in the future. This morning I had my airport commission meeting, and they're talking about a tower out there. We have an FAA meeting coming up on August 6th out at the airport that I'm going to go out there for. So that's the end of my report.
Good, thank
And
you.
the rest is in here.
Yeah. Mark?
Well, since I yielded most of my time to the Steve Commissioner Vance, my report
I
was rather
apologize.
short.
I absolutely apologize.
And I understand the part of your last comment with the tower at the airport. They need it. I'm
They
surprised.
absolutely need
I'm
it.
surprised with all the training for MSU students and stuff. Yeah, it's really needed. Did have MAPO just open house on the upcoming TIP transportation improvement plan that we're working on, or it's going to happen. That was on the 10th of July, and then the 12th I did go to Waseca for our solid waste meeting. That's where we get an update, and everybody gives their best practices and all the things they do. And I think I'm busy with other endeavors, work-wise. But that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Just a couple things that weren't mentioned already. On the 15th, we had our detox annual meeting, and we had a real frank discussion about the types of people that we've been refusing to take at detox, and we kind of came away with an understanding that we were going to put more effort into taking more people. Some of the people that we had refused before because of different medical issues and psychological issues, we're going to make a real effort to take them as patients. Then on the 19th, we had the interviews for the new executive director at Detox. We had 7 excellent candidates. We hired a young lady from Florida who has lots of experience in detox, drug courts, and stuff like that. So she will be starting the first part of September, and I think that she will be a wonderful director for the detox over there. Then yesterday I had the Rural Minnesota Energy Board meeting down in Slayton. had a demonstration on electric cars, and it was very interesting. We had, one of the organizations had a Chevy Volt there, and he brought up a map of southern Minnesota, and he showed all the charging stations. There were just all over the place I was surprised that we had that many charging stations for these cars, but he then mentioned that they're all campgrounds. If you have a 50 amp service at a campground, you can pull in there and charge your Volt, a quick charge. So I was very interested in that. And the other one was a Tesla, and although that's a very nice looking car, probably a little more
Costly?
and efficient than the Chevy Volt, but the only place you can charge them is at a Tesla charging station. So,
Yeah.
but he talked about the cost associated with them, and the costs are definitely significant for both these vehicles. But I think they're gaining popularity as time moves forward, and that's my report.
Mr. Chair, there's
Yes.
one thing both Kip and I forgot, is we supported the Mankato's recommendation that they do a study on 169, the short corridor, and we also told them about checking in with the 169 Corridor Association, so I forgot that, and I thought fans would be
Thank you.
interested in that.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
And
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, I did forget,
Okay.
the Transportation Alliance is going to have their annual meeting here in Mankato come this fall, November 4th, at the Verizon Center. So that's going to bring a large group of people right here to Mankato. And I was pretty proud to be able to be part of that, to bring it back to Mankato.
Yeah. So, great. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
So, is there any other business we need to conduct?
That's all I have for you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.